My son called me at 2 in the morning. I was asleep in the recliner with the television still on, some late-night infomercial flickering light across the living room ceiling. The phone buzzed off the armrest and hit the hardwood floor, and I fumbled for it in the dark the way old men do, knees complaining, back stiff from sleeping upright again. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost told myself it was a wrong number or a robocall, the kind that hit at strange hours and offered me car warranties I didn't need. But something in my chest wouldn't let me put it back down. I answered, "Dad." My son's voice was barely a voice at all. It was a fracture. A man trying to hold himself together over a phone line at 2 in the morning while the edges of him crumbled. "Dad, I need you to listen to me carefully. Don't come here. Don't do anything. Just listen," which meant I was already reaching for my boots. He told me Derek had done it. He told me his business partner of 11 years, the man who had stood beside him at his wedding, the man whose children called my son Uncle Marcus at birthday parties, had gone to the board that evening with a folder full of documents. Forged documents, contracts with Marcus's signature on wire transfers that never happened, invoices to shell companies Marcus had never heard of, a paper trail so clean and deliberate it looked like a museum exhibit. Derek had handed the board a story, and the board had believed it, because Derek's father was on the board, and Derek's father-in-law was the firm's outside counsel, and men like that don't need the truth to be believable. They just need to say it first. The company my son had built from a cramped shared office space in a strip mall in Nashville. The company he had named after his mother who passed when he was 26. The company that employed 43 people and had just signed a contract with a regional hospital network that would have changed all of their lives. The company was gone, seized pending investigation, and the police were coming to the house to question Marcus as a formality. Derek's lawyer had said, "Just a formality. Bring your own attorney if you'd like." My son did not have his own attorney. My son had an accountant he trusted and a handshake agreement that had never needed paper between him and a man he called his best friend. I didn't tell Marcus I was coming. I hung up, laced my boots, grabbed my jacket off the hook by the door, and walked to the truck. The November air in Tennessee hit me like a cold hand across the face, but I didn't feel it. My hands were steady. I want to be clear about that. My hands were completely steady. I am 67 years old. I have white hair and a bad hip, and I eat oatmeal every morning because my doctor told me to 18 months ago, and I've complied without enthusiasm. I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck because I like it and because a man should drive what he earned. My neighbors think I am a retired hardware store manager who gardens too much and talks to his dog. I wave at them when I get the mail. I bring them tomatoes in summer. I am, to every visible eye, exactly what I appear to be. That has always been the plan. I drove 40 minutes to my son's house on the east side of Nashville without turning on the radio. I drove the speed limit. I thought about Marcus when he was 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table doing long division, chewing on his pencil eraser, absolutely refusing to ask for help, because he had decided that asking for help was something other people did. I thought about his mother, how she used to stand in the doorway watching him and shake her head and say, "That boy got your stubbornness, Walter, and I hope to God it serves him better than it served you." I thought about the morning I sat across from Marcus in a hospital room after his wife delivered their daughter, and the way he looked at that baby like she had rearranged the entire meaning of every decision he had ever made. I pulled up to his house. 2 police cars were already in the driveway. There was another car, a black SUV, parked along the curb. Expensive, tinted windows, the kind of car that signals a man who needs people to understand his importance before he opens his door. I parked across the street. I walked up the driveway. A young officer put a hand out before I reached the front step. "Sir, this is an active scene. I'm going to need you to stay back. That is my son's house. My name is Walter Greer. I'm his father." The officer looked at me the way people look at elderly men who show up somewhere they don't belong. Patient, slightly patronizing. He told me to wait by the mailbox. I waited by the mailbox. The front door was open. Through it I could see Marcus in the entryway, still in the clothes he had worn to work that morning, tie loosened, face the color of concrete. He was talking to a man in a sport coat who had the expression of someone performing concern. Beside Marcus's wife, who was holding their daughter against her shoulder, the little girl was 4 years old and asleep, completely unaware that her world was shifting, stood a tall man in a dark overcoat. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching. He was watching Marcus with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had placed a bet and was waiting for the envelope to confirm he won. Derek Holloway. I had known Derek for 11 years. I had watched him eat Thanksgiving dinner at my son's table. I had handed him a beer at more backyard cookouts than I could count. He was charming in the way that hollow things are charming all surface, catching light beautifully, nothing behind the shine. I had never trusted him. I had told Marcus once, quietly, over coffee, that something about the man sat wrong with me. Marcus had laughed and said, "Dad, not everyone who wears nice shoes is a criminal." And I had let it go, because Marcus was happy, and the company was growing, and some hills are not yours to die on. I wish I had died on that one. Derek saw me from across the entryway. He tilted his head slightly, the way a man does when he sees something mildly interesting, like a crow on a fence post. He said something to the officer nearest him, I couldn't hear what, and the officer walked to the door and called out to the young man who had sent me to the mailbox. 30 seconds later, I was being told by two different people in official clothing that I needed to leave the property. "I am his father," I said again, looking past them at Marcus. Marcus looked at me. His eyes said 100 things, all of them terrible. He gave me a small shake of his head, the gesture of a man who has already decided to endure what is happening to him and doesn't want to watch his father endure it too. The officer's hand found my elbow. "Sir, you need to go." I let them walk me back to the street. I want to be very precise about this. I did not fight them. I did not raise my voice. I walked back to the curb with my hands loose at my sides, and I stood there while they watched me to make sure I stayed. And when the front door closed, I looked at the black SUV parked along the curb, and I read the private plate number twice, until I had it memorized. Then I got back in my truck. Derek thought he had just neutralized the only loose variable in his plan. He thought the old man in the worn jacket was a grief problem, a nuisance problem, the kind of problem that resolves itself when you close the door firmly enough. He looked at me and saw a retired nobody whose best play was calling a neighborhood lawyer and writing strongly worded letters on yellow legal pads. 11 years ago, I handed my son the keys to a building I owned in the Gulch and told him it was a good place to start a company. I told him the lease terms were favorable because I knew the landlord personally. I did not tell him that I was the landlord. I did not tell him that the building was one of 11 commercial properties I held through a trust I established in 2003. I did not tell him that the trust was managed by a firm in Washington that also managed the holdings of 3 sitting senators and a former Secretary of Commerce. I did not tell him these things because I made a decision a long time ago that my son would build his own life without the shadow of mine falling across it. His mother and I agreed on that before she died. We agreed that money given is a ceiling, not a floor. We agreed that the most important thing we could give him was the experience of earning. He earned it. He earned every square foot of that company. And then Derek Holloway took 11 years of earning and wrapped it in forged paper and handed it to a board that was already owned. I drove to my office. Not the office anyone in Nashville knows about. The one on the 14th floor of a building in Germantown with a frosted glass door that says Greer Capital Holdings in letters small enough to miss if you are not looking. I had a key. I let myself in. I turned on the desk lamp. I sat down in the chair that has held me through 30 years of decisions, and I opened my laptop. I called my attorney at 3:15 in the morning. Her name is Diane Reyes, and she has been my counsel since 1994, and she answers on the second ring regardless of the hour, because that is the arrangement we have, and she is compensated accordingly. "Walter," she said. Her voice was alert, not surprised. I told her what had happened. I told her about the board meeting, the forged documents, the police at Marcus's door. I told her about Derek Holloway and Derek's father on the board, and Derek's father-in-law as outside counsel. She listened without interrupting. That is one of Diane's great gifts. When I finished, she said, "Tell me what you want." "I want Marcus's name clean," I said. "I want the charges to disappear before a single filing hits a public record. I want the company returned to him whole. And I want Derek Holloway to understand what he did and to whom he did it." "That last part," Diane said carefully, "is going to require some care." "I know. That is why I am calling you and not handling it myself." I heard the sound of her chair adjusting, papers moving. "All right. I need 2 hours. Take 1. I said. She took 90 minutes. She called back at 4:45 and the tone of her voice had changed from attorney in motion to attorney with ammunition, which is my favorite version of Diane. The board meeting tonight was irregular, she told me. 2 members were not properly notified. That alone invalidates any resolution they passed. She had already contacted both members, one of whom was deeply unhappy about being excluded, and was prepared to say so loudly and in writing by morning. Derek's financial documents, Diane had sent them to a forensic accountant she trusted, a woman who had testified in 43 federal cases and had once made a senior partner at Goldman Sachs cry on a deposition stand. The accountant needed 48 hours. Fine. We had 48 hours. And Walter, Diane said, her voice dropping to the register she uses when something important is coming. I ran Derek Holloway's personal financials. His own, separate from the company. What did you find? He is in debt to the ceiling. 3 refinances on his home in 5 years. 2 civil judgments from vendors. A tax lien the IRS filed in September that he has been contesting with the help of his father-in-law's firm. He needs this, Walter. He needs Marcus's company because his name on the letterhead is the only thing standing between him and a complete financial collapse. He wasn't stealing out of greed. He was stealing out of desperation, which means he is going to fight dirty, I said. Yes, Diane confirmed. Men drowning always do. I hung up. I looked out the window at the Nashville skyline, the city I had built pieces of quietly and without announcement for 3 decades. I thought about desperation. I understood it, in the abstract. I had been desperate once, a long time ago, younger than Derek was now, sitting in a borrowed office with borrowed furniture and a phone that rang twice a day if I was fortunate. Desperation is the great equalizer. It does not care about your education or your father's connections. It comes for everyone eventually. The difference is what you choose to do when it arrives. I reached into the desk drawer and took out a single business card. Plain white. My name and a phone number. I have given this card to exactly 9 people in the last 20 years. 2 of them are governors. One of them runs the largest commercial real estate fund in the Southeast. And one of them is the chairman of the bank that holds the primary operating account for the company. Derek Holloway's father built his entire social identity around. I made 1 phone call. It lasted 4 minutes. I asked for one thing. By morning, I wanted to know every dollar Derek Holloway owed. To whom, and on what terms. By 7 a.m., I knew. I went home, showered, put on a suit, not the charcoal one I saved for courtrooms. The navy one, the one Marcus gave me for my birthday 3 years ago. The one he saved up for, and had tailored and presented to me with a card that said, "Dad, you deserve something that fits." I put on that suit because I wanted to be wearing something he chose when I finished this. I called Marcus at 7:30. He answered immediately, which told me he had not slept. "Dad, where are you?" He sounded hollowed out. His daughter had apparently woken up twice in the night, and his wife had found him sitting in the kitchen at 4 a.m., staring at the wall. "Don't come to the house. Derek's lawyers told me any contact with you could—" "Marcus." I kept my voice level. "I need you to listen to me. Not as your father. As someone who needs you to trust him completely for the next 24 hours. A pause. What are you going to do? I am going to end this. But I need you to sit still and let me work. Dad, you are a retired hardware man. I say this with love, but I know what you think I am," I told him. "I built that. I built it carefully and I built it on purpose. And I owe you an explanation that I am going to give you when this is over. But right now I need you to stay in your house. Answer no questions without Diane Reyes present, and let me handle the rest." Another silence. Longer this time. "Who is Diane Reyes?" "My attorney," I said. "She will be at your door within the hour. Do not speak to anyone until she arrives." I heard him exhale, a sound that was partly relief and partly the disorientation of a man realizing the floor is not where he thought it was. "All right," he said quietly. "All right, Dad." The offices of Holloway and Greer Capital Solutions were on the 3rd floor of a glass building in Brentwood, a southern suburb where the money was new and the landscaping was aggressive. I had been to this building once, years ago, when Marcus cut the ribbon and bought champagne for the whole office staff and looked around the room at the people who had believed in him, and I had stood in the corner and quietly come apart in the best way a man can come apart. I walked in at 9:15. The lobby receptionist was young, professional, and completely unprepared for a 67-year-old man in a navy suit to bypass the front desk and take the elevator to the third floor without stopping to sign in. By the time she found words, the elevator doors had closed. The third floor was already tense. I could feel it the moment the doors opened. The kind of tension that lives in offices where something has gone wrong, and everyone knows it, but no one is saying it out loud. Assistants were staring at screens with expressions too focused to be genuine. A cluster of 3 people near the coffee station disbanded the moment I stepped off the elevator, returning to their desks with the purposeful movement of people trying to look uninvolved. Derek's office was in the corner, glass walls, like most of the suite. I could see him before he saw me. He was on the phone, jacket off, tie perfect, standing behind his desk with the posture of a man in the middle of managing a crisis he believes he controls. His father-in-law's associate was in the guest chair with a legal pad. I opened the door. Derek turned. The phone call ended in 3 words I didn't catch. He looked at me the way he had. Looked at me the night before from Marcus's doorway, that tilted head assessment, that slight curling of the corner of his mouth, that he probably thought read as amusement, but actually read as the expression of a man who has never genuinely feared anything, and therefore does not recognize the approach of the thing that should frighten him most. "Walter," he said. His voice was warm in the way that empty rooms are warm, ambient, hollow. "This isn't a great time, and honestly, I am not sure it is appropriate for you to be here given the situation with Marcus." The associate with the legal pad looked up and then immediately decided to study the carpet. I sat down in the other guest chair. I did not wait to be invited. "Derek," I said, "I am going to say something, and I need you to hear it completely before you respond. Can you do that?" He set the phone down. He crossed his arms. He gave me the nod of a man humoring an elder at a family dinner. "The bank that holds your personal mortgage," I said. "The second refinance you took out in 2021. They sold that note this morning." Derek's expression did not change. He had good control. I respected it in the abstract. "They sold it to a trust," I continued, "called Ledger Hill Holdings. You won't find much about Ledger Hill publicly. It is structured to be quiet. But the general counsel of Ledger Hill reached out to your loan servicer this morning to introduce the new terms. Specifically, the acceleration clause in Section 14 of your refinance agreement, which allows the note holder to call the full balance due upon evidence of financial irregularity by the borrower." Derek uncrossed his arms. "In addition," I said, "the 2 civil judgments currently on record against you were purchased last night by a separate entity. You now owe both amounts, combined, to the same holder. And the IRS lien you have been contesting, I spoke with your father-in-law's firm this morning. They will be withdrawing from that representation as of this afternoon." Derek sat down, not in a controlled way, in the way that legs decide things before the mind catches up. The associate with the legal pad had stopped pretending to study the carpet. He was staring at me with the expression of a man watching something he knows he will describe to people for years. "Who are you?" Derek asked. His voice was still controlled, but the warmth was completely gone. "I am Marcus's father," I said. "I have always been Marcus's father. That has not changed." "That is not what I asked." "I know." I reached into the inside pocket of my suit and placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. It was a summary document Diane had prepared. Clean. 1 page. My full name at the top, followed by a list of entities I control, directly or through trusts, in the greater Nashville metropolitan area. The building Derek's office sat in was 4th on the list. Derek picked up the paper. He read it. I watched his face the way I used to watch juries, when a key piece of evidence was read into the record, looking for the exact moment the narrative in their heads shifted from one version of reality to another. The moment came about halfway down the page. His jaw tightened. His eyes stopped moving. He set the paper down very carefully, the way you set down something you wish you had never touched. "You own this building," he said. "Among others." "Yes. The lease for this office is held by an LLC that reports to Ledger Hill Holdings, which means that as of this morning, the lease for this office is also subject to review. Specifically, the conduct clause on page 8, which prohibits the use of leased premises in furtherance of fraudulent activity." Derek stood up. There was a quality to his stillness that I recognized from a long time ago, from another life, from rooms where things were decided that changed people forever. It was the stillness of a man calculating whether there was any move left on the board. There wasn't, and some part of him already knew it. He looked at the associate. "Get out," he said. The associate got out. For a moment it was just the two of us in that glass corner office, with the Brentwood landscaping visible behind Derek's shoulder. Very green, and very deliberate, and completely indifferent to what was happening inside. "I trusted you," Derek said. His voice had changed. The control was cracking at the edges, not into anger, but into something worse. Something that sounded almost like grief. "Marcus trusted you. You let him build something with someone you knew was—" "I didn't know," I said. "I want to be honest with you about that. I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know. And that is a distinction I will carry for the rest of my life." He looked out the window. The muscle in his jaw worked. "The forensic accountant Diane retained," I continued, "found the original wire transfers. She found the accounts they actually moved through. She found the timestamps that contradict the documents you presented to the board. That information will be in the hands of the district attorney by noon today, unless the following things happen." I laid it out clearly. Marcus's shares restored. The forged documents retracted with a full written statement to the board. Derek's resignation from the company, effective immediately. Restitution of all diverted funds, documented and verified by an independent auditor within 72 hours. "And if I don't," Derek said flatly, "then the DA gets the package at noon. Diane files a civil suit by close of business, and I exercise every clause in every agreement that currently touches any asset with your name on it." He was quiet for a long time. Outside the glass walls, I could see assistants pretending not to look. "Why are you giving me the choice?" he asked finally. "Because my son worked beside you for 11 years, I said. "Because your children played in his backyard. Because there is a version of you that is a desperate man who made a catastrophic decision. And there is a version of you that is a criminal, and right now you are still standing at the line between those two things. And because Marcus would not want me to burn you completely if there is another way. He is a better man than the situation requires." Derek looked at me. For the first time, he looked at me without any calculation in it. Just a man looking at another man over the wreckage of a thing that didn't have to happen this way. He sat back down. He put his hands flat on the desk. "Get me a pen," he said. Marcus came to my office that evening. I had called him at 2 in the afternoon to tell him the charges had been dropped, that the board had convened an emergency session, that his shares were being restored, and that Derek had resigned. There was a silence on the phone that lasted almost 30 seconds. I let it breathe. Sometimes silence is the only appropriate container for something that large. He came to Germantown at 7 o'clock. He stood in front of the frosted glass door with the small letters and looked at it for a moment before he pushed it open. I was at my desk. I didn't stand up immediately. I let him walk in and look around. I let him see the bookshelves and the framed documents and the photographs. Some of them he had seen in the cabin or the house over the years and never asked about because context shapes what we notice. A framed letter means something different on a study wall than it does on an office wall with a company name on the door. He picked up a photograph from the credenza. It was taken in 2001. I was 30 years younger and standing in front of a construction crane at a site in East Nashville, shaking hands with a city council member who had since become a congressman. He put it down. He turned to me. "How long?" he asked. "Since before you were born," I said. "I built the first property when I was 29. Your mother knew. She was the only person who knew." He sat down in the chair across from my desk, not the guest chair. He pulled up the one from against the wall, the plain one, and sat in it and looked at his hands. "The hardware store," he said, "was real. I bought it in 1991 because I liked the work and because it gave me a reason to talk to people without being anything other than a man who knew where the half-inch bolts were kept." He was quiet for a moment. When he looked up, there were things moving in his face that I did not have names for, which is unusual for me. "I have built a life on reading faces. Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Not angry. Something more complicated than angry. "Because I watched what money did to the children of men I knew," I said. "I watched it take away their hunger. Not hunger for food. Hunger for the thing you get when you earn something yourself and know it is yours completely. I watched it make them soft in ways that couldn't be fixed later, And your mother and I decided that you would build your own floor, that whatever you became would be yours. And now? And now you have built it, I said. And now you know. He looked at the window. Nashville at night, the lights of the city we both belong to in very different ways. 43 people, he said quietly. My employees. I thought I was going to have to call them all today. I thought I was going to have to stand in that office and tell 43 people who trusted me. I know. You knew last night, he said. When I called you, you already knew what you were going to do. I knew what I could do, I said. There is a difference. He nodded slowly. He rubbed the side of his face the way he has done since he was a child, when he is processing something too large for the usual channels. Derek, he said finally. Derek made a choice, I said. He will live with it. His family will not be destroyed. His children will not go without. But he will not be in a position to do this to anyone else. That was the line I drew. Marcus looked at me for a long time. I don't know who you are, he said. I mean, I know you. You're my father. But I don't know who you are. Yes, you do, I said. I am the man who drove 40 minutes at 2 in the morning without putting on my coat because you called. Everything else is just the tools I use to fix the problem. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. He asked me to walk him through it, so I did. I told him about Ledger Hill, and the properties, and Diane Reyes, and the forensic accountant, and the phone call at 4:45, and the one business card I keep in the desk drawer. I told him about the Navy suit and why I wore it. He listened the way he used to listen as a boy, completely still, the way still water is deep. When I finished, he said, Mom knew all of this. Your mother knew everything, I said. She was the one who decided we wouldn't tell you. I want you to understand that. It was her call as much as mine. He looked at the photograph on the credenza again. She would have enjoyed today, he said. She would have been furious with me for not stepping in sooner, I said. He laughed then. A real one. The kind that breaks through when you are too exhausted and too relieved to hold anything back anymore. It sounded like the man I raised, and it was the best sound I had heard in 48 hours. We sat in that office for 2 more hours. I walked him through everything, not as a briefing, as a conversation between a father and a son who had some catching up to do on the subject of who they were to each other. He asked questions I answered honestly, including the hard ones, the ones about why I kept the hardware store open even after I didn't need to, why I drove the old truck, why I still ate at the same diner on Thursdays, and knew the waitress's daughter's name and brought my own tomatoes to the neighbors, because that is who I am, I told him. The rest of it is what I built. The man who showed up at your door at 3 in the morning in worn boots, that man is not a costume. That man is the one who was there when you needed him. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The building, the one in the gulch, the one you said you knew the landlord of. Yes. When can we renegotiate the lease? I laughed. Genuinely. The way old men laugh when the thing they raised becomes exactly the thing they hoped for. Come to my office Monday morning, I said. Wear the good shoes. He stood up. He picked up his jacket. At the door he stopped, hand on the frame, and looked back at me the way his mother used to look at me when she was deciding whether to say the thing she was thinking. Thank you, Dad, he said. Not for the money. Not for the buildings or the lawyers or the accounts. Thank you for driving. I turned off the desk lamp. I know, I said. The drive home was quiet. The city moved past my windows, all its lit windows and late traffic, all its people making the 1,000 small choices that add up to a life. I have driven this route hundreds of times. Tonight it felt like the first time and the last time at once, which is a feeling I have learned not to question. Some nights carry more weight than others. Some nights you drive home knowing that tomorrow the world looks slightly different than it did yesterday, not because anything dramatic happened, but because a thing that was wrong has been made right, and right has a weight to it, a gravity, that you feel in the chest long after the work is done. I pulled into my driveway. The porch light was on, the way it always is. I sat in the truck for a moment before going in. My neighbors think I am a retired hardware store manager who gardens too much and talks to his dog. I have never once corrected them. Some things you keep quiet, not because you are hiding, but because you know that the man with dirty hands who shows up when it matters is worth more than any title on any frosted glass door in any city in this country. Real power does not announce itself. It arrives. And when it is done, it goes home, eats oatmeal in the morning, and lets the people it loves believe they did it on their own, until the night they need to know otherwise. If this story hit something in you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to step out of the role people put you in to protect someone you love? Tell me where you are watching from and what that moment felt like. I will read every one. See you in the next one.